Chad Litzenberger is the mine's superintendent.
This mining machine is a $30 million mining machine and setup that chews the face, cuts the ore, puts it into a conveyor system in the front, and ultimately starts to convey it into the conveyor belt system to get to the shaft.
It's one of 10 boring machines operating at this site alone.
Yeah, you can feel the heat coming off the metal, and this machine is putting some significant horsepower into the face. I believe it's 700 horsepower on each arm, just chewing away at creating crushed ore.
Chewing away up to 900 tonnes of ore an hour. The ore is about 40% potash, 5% clay, and 55% sodium chloride, or salt.
The ground underneath is incredibly soft, a little bit like walking on sand at the beach. We've got to watch out for some of these cables. It's really warm too, it's 27 degrees year round. But what really blows my mind is the fact that this mineral coming out here will be exported to almost every continent around the globe.
And that's helping farmers to feed millions of people. For Chad, a trip to India some years ago highlighted the impact of using fertilisers such as potash.
I can remember one conversation where one of the farmers said they are growing their crops and having a nine-time yield increase. And as he was talking about this, I asked him, well, what do you do with all the extra material? And he said he had so much that he actually bought a grain bin. And I'm a Saskatchewan farm background kid, so I'm looking around for a 20,000 bushel bin, and I couldn't see it anywhere. And I finally asked him, where's your grain bin? And he said, well, you're leaning on it. And there's this barrel, a 200 liter barrel. And it was starting to hit me that,
That's
the amount...
That's more like a garbage bin.
Exactly. And so then I asked him what he does with all the extra, assuming that he would sell it on the market or buy something, and he said, well, we eat more. And this is when it hit me, of the purpose that we do here, the agriculture sector that we're in. And so sometimes I feel like we get a little disconnected from the day-to-day activities and what we're doing in a mining operation, but the purpose that we have is to truly support feeding the world.
About half the food produced on the planet is grown using commercial fertilisers, primarily made up of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, or NP and K. But it comes at a cost to the environment.
There's greenhouse gas emissions, both pre-farm, on-farm, and also through post-farm activities, including through waste distribution. We have environmental impacts, which include eutrophication of waterways. That's increased nitrogen in the waterways, which can increase algal blooms, and sometimes acidification of soils associated with fertiliser application.
Mark Howden is Director of the Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions at the Australian National University. He says the application of nitrogen fertilisers contributes a little under 3% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions.
In Australia, roughly speaking, in agriculture, about 14 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents a year. So that's a few percent of our total emissions. So it's significant, but it's not a massive contributor like, say, our electricity system. With other fertilisers, such as phosphate fertilisers, you don't get those same greenhouse gases on farm, but they still have an energy footprint, so during their mining and processing and distribution of those. So different fertilisers have different footprints effectively.
Those footprints are leading some governments to impose restrictions. In 2021, Sri Lanka banned all commercial fertilisers. New Zealand's recently capped nitrogen use on its farms. And in the Netherlands, the government is buying back farms over concerns about nitrogen runoff.
So in Sri Lanka, that was largely a function of foreign currency limitations and the ability to buy in those fertilisers, which then got very politicised. And that was a big problem because it drove down food production in Sri Lanka. If you look at, say, the Netherlands or New Zealand, the big drive there is particularly groundwater pollution and river pollution, so it's nitrogen in the groundwater and in the river systems.
In Canada, a country with similar production systems to Australia, the policy is different again. 3 years ago, the Trudeau government set a target to reduce the emissions from fertiliser application by 30% by 2030.
To be honest, it kind of caught everyone in the industry off guard. I wouldn't say anyone anticipated this kind of announcement, and to date it appears to be met with somewhat of a mixture of confusion, frustration, and for some people, hostility.
Alberta-based journalist Trevor Back is following the policy.
Now, what's interesting about this is these are voluntary targets, and farmers obviously need fertilizer to have a successful crop. And so with the word voluntary in the language there, no one's really sure why they would reduce the fertilizer if they need it. So that's what's caused some confusion among the ag industry. We have all types of agriculture in Canada, but the grain sector is massive, billions, tens of billions of dollars. And so the idea that farmers would not necessarily be able to use their desired quantity of fertilizer, their primary input, is a frightening prospect for many.
For now, Trevor says the policy has stalled.
Industry came out after the government said 30%, and they published a paper and they said the best we can do is 16%. And after that, there's been a bit of a standstill. Nothing really has been happening.
The Australian government's working on a plan to reduce agricultural emissions as part of its net zero by 2050 commitment. It's unclear what could be in that. For now, the government hasn't really said anything about changes to fertiliser application on farms, but there's some concern that that could change.
The risk I see for Australia is that the government may copy what's being done in other countries. That isn't necessarily the blueprint for Australia.
Stephen Annals is from the industry body Fertiliser Australia.